Today we're going to be showing you our shiny new fruit cage that actually isn't a fruit cage, so come and join us and find out why.
Hello, welcome to English Country Life. Welcome to the garden on a day where the rain has just stopped, and welcome to our shiny new fruit cage that we plan to use for currants. Now, we've been planning to upgrade our infrastructure in this area for some time, and we've been looking around, we've been comparing the designs, the material specifications and the prices of various fruit cages, and we've gone with this from Garden Life Direct. Now, normally they make walk-in runs for chickens, but honestly this is cheaper, better, stronger than any commercial fruit cage that we could find. So today we're going to walk you through our decision process, and we are going to show you how to get a discount on them at the end to get a real bargain price.
It falls to me to give you a whistle-stop tour of this fruit cage and why we think it's so good. But how do we come to this conclusion in the first place? Well, we already have a commercial fruit cage, and there were certain things about it which actually we weren't very happy with. So we were looking for solutions to that, but we didn't want to spend any more. And this, quite frankly, it's cheaper, it is stronger, it's got better longevity, and why wouldn't we have this if that is the option? So why do we like it so much? Well, the first thing is all of the uprights, the horizontals, these diagonals, these great big posts here are 38mm. They are massive, almost scaffold posts. They are so robust, and they're hot dipped galvanized, which means that they're not going to rust. So that gives us great longevity. So it's a one-off payment, and then it's going to last us for years and years and years. The next thing is that it's got this 1-inch weld mesh, and it's 19 gauge weld mesh if you're interested in that kind of thing. Hugh is, me not so much, but nonetheless that's big enough so that insects can get in and pollinate the flowers, so we still get the fruit, but it's not wide enough that things like blackbirds or sparrows can get inside and steal the fruit once it's formed, because let's face it, that fruit is really valuable to us. Of all the things we grow here on the small holding, it's probably the most expensive thing that we would have to buy if we didn't grow it ourselves. So it actually means protecting it is more important. But this weld mesh comes in such great lengths, they send you so much of it, you've got the ability really to cover the whole thing and add an extra skirt from the outside. So we've actually got extending out along the floor. And why would we want to do that? Well, what that means is that nothing actually is going to dig a hole and easily burrow up inside. And that's great for us because we do have a rabbit problem here. And rabbits are actually doing that in our commercial fruit cage, and I really don't like it. So our fruit in this fruit cage is going to be better protected. But let's have a look at the next part of this wonderful structure. Another really important aspect of a fruit cage for us was a doorway, which sounds really obvious. It's not the fact it's got a doorway, well, it is important, but it's actually the width of the doorway, because you might notice inside the fruit cage we've actually got a really thick mulch of wood chip, and that's because I want to suppress the weeds, because both Hugh and I, we don't like weeding. It's a waste of time in our book, and actually the mulch does that for us. But to get the mulch in, if I didn't have a doorway that we could easily get a standard wheelbarrow size through, we would have to fill trucks full of wood chip and physically carry them in, which is heavy on our arms. And for me, I don't have the upper body strength. And quite frankly, I'm a bit lazy too. But if I can get all the wood chip in a wheelbarrow and get it through the doorway and just tip it up inside, it makes life so simple, so much easier. And this doorway is wide enough for us to be able to do that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is about the door is really simple fitting. So it's just got a simple bolt, but it doesn't need to be any more than that to keep it closed and actually keep it secure. It doesn't have to be complicated, does it? Now, there's a couple of things I do want to point out. There are some additions we've made. So we've put this little handle on just because it's easier to open the door. But the other thing is these little cross braces here at the top, there's two of them. These are ones which we have fitted. They're not in the original instructions, so if you do want to do those, we would recommend actually fitting those if you can. And why did we do it? Well, for our walk-in run that we're using for the chickens for the broody area, we did find over winter that the door dropped very slightly over winter, and these cross braces just mean that the shape will actually stay exactly as it is, so it'll be less of an issue. But those are the only two real changes that we made there. Now actually fitting the door, you might think, is really complicated, but it's simpler than you might think. They're actually hung from these two brackets at the top, but putting the weld mesh on it, you're not having to measure this area, measure that area and this area. What you do is essentially put one great big length of weld mesh across the entire front of the fruit cage. You staple the weld mesh to the frame and to the door, and then you get your tin snips and you just cut round the door. I mean, how simple is that? I can't believe the Garden Life Direct thought of that. It saves so much time. The third thing which was really important to us was actually the roof. Now, what is it about the roof which is important to us? Well, it's cold weather protection. And that is, the thing to think about is, if you have heavy snow, okay, so we have got a commercial fruit cage, it's got a flat roof, this has got a pitched roof. Where do you think snow is going to settle? And the other thing is about the flat roof on our commercial fruit cage is that it's actually covered with nylon bird netting. That's standard. Whereas this has got these scaffold poles and 1-inch weld mesh. So the weight this can take is significantly more than our commercial fruit cage. And it has to be said, one of our neighbours actually did lose her fruit cage because snow actually bent the aluminium poles completely and collapsed the entire fruit cage just by the weight of the snow on that roof. Now, in times of winter when it's snowing an awful lot, we would have to be out regularly or take that roof off completely to prevent permanent damage happening to the fruit cage. But with this structure, maybe once every few days we come out with a broom and just brush off any snow which is still in place. It's actually far less work on this structure than it is on a commercial fruit cage.
It falls to me to talk to you about putting this fruit cage / chicken run together. Actually, it's a real good news story. The instructions they sent are quite obviously written by guys who built them. They're written in proper English because they're a good local firm to us. They've got lots of illustrations and actually they're not really very hard to put together. So that's all the good news story. There are a couple of little tips and tricks that I want to share with you before you get one and before you try it. The first one is give yourself plenty of time and make sure there's at least two of you to put it together. None of it's particularly heavy, none of it's like requires, you know, brute strength, but there's often one of those jobs where you require two pairs of hands, either one person holding something while the other person does up various nuts and bolts, or one person on the inside and one person on the outside. So when you're doing tasks like tying on the wire, you can pass the tie through and you've got someone on the other side to pass it back to you. Just makes life considerably simpler. There's a few other little wrinkles that we found. For example, when you're tying on the wire at the bottom, you can use a tent peg to almost drill a little hole, and tent pegs come supplied, and that makes it easier to pass the tie through. And we'll show you that in a little sort of video montage in a minute. But something else that I want to suggest is there are two tools that if you have them, or you can buy them, they're both really cheap, will make your life much easier. The first is a set of these. These are called aviation snips. They're sort of sprung tin snips. And for cutting the wire to length, which comes on great big rolls, these will really make your life simpler. You can do it with an ordinary pair of side cutters, wire cutters, but because the jaws on them are very small, there's an awful lot of cuts to make. Something like these will speed the job up enormously. The other thing is, because the poles in here are hot dip galvanised, which means they're given a sort of zinc-based coating to make them really corrosion resistant, some of that coating can get into the threads of the bolts that hold all the corners together. And that can make it hard, if not impossible, to put the bolts in. If you've got a little tap and die set, which are used to cut threads on wood or metal, etc., you can just chase out any of the hot dip galvanisation that's blocked the threads inside the unit, and it just makes the bolts much simpler to put in. Again, these cost a matter of a few pounds and they're always worth having, but even for this job alone, if you're putting up a run, I definitely suggest spend a few quid, get both of those tools. It'll make your life much easier. Let's take a little look at how we put this one together. You don't need to be handy to put together one of these runs. Honestly, they're very straightforward, but the boxes of poles are heavy, so either use a sack truck or get a friend to help you lift them. Very much worthwhile laying out the parts in advance, making sure they're all there, and also making sure you can put your hand on them, because these are big installations and you don't want to be holding something and searching for a part. Trust me, organisation is key. The basic assembly of this is really simple. You get a bunch of brackets, and on each of those brackets are welded some nuts, and there's a hole that goes through the bracket. And into that nut you put a special kind of bolt that's supplied, and it has a fitting on the end that looks pretty much exactly like a butterfly nut. So you can do it up with finger and thumb. You don't need spanners or socket sets or anything like that. And then you slot each bracket onto different lengths of poles and do up those bolts with your finger and thumb. The really clever part of this system is that it's modular. You can make your installation as long as you want it to be. You make these cross-sectional pieces, and to each cross-sectional piece you add these joining poles. And you need to imagine that this is lying on its side at the moment. And when you've added the joining poles, what you can then do is put another cross-section onto it and just keep building your installation as long as you want it to be. It'll make more sense now when you see us roll this into place with the first two sections that are now self-supporting. And once you've got that in place, you can just keep bolting in more connecting poles and more section ends, and you make your run, your fruit cage, whatever it happens to be, as long as you want it to be. Now, in this design, these pieces are 2 metre widths, and we've got 4 of them, so we've got an 8 metre long, 4 metre wide polytunnel. And when we've put the frame together, this is what you get. And honestly, once you've done 1 or 2 of these pieces, you get really fast at it. You can actually knock these things together incredibly quickly because there's no tools involved. It's just tightening with your fingers. I did want to show you how this thing goes together. That's the hole on the inside of a bracket, and you can see some little spot welds there. And the whole thing is hot dip galvanised, which, as I said before, can go down into the threads of that nut. So having a tap and die set just allows you to chase out any of that galvanisation from the threads of the nut, which does make it easier to put those butterfly bolts in place and makes the whole thing go together very smoothly. Together the doors is simplicity itself, but again, it's a little job. Just take your time and do have 2 of you, because it really helps to have that second pair of hands. What I found is having Fiona able to hold them while I put the screws in to put the door together just made the job so much simpler than messing with clamps. The other thing I did was when I put together the frame, I put some little shims between the door and the frame to make sure it was going to hang evenly and neatly. And again, having Fiona to hold that frame in place while I screwed it on with the supplied brackets just made it a quick, simple job. And then when we hung the door, again, we re-shimmed the door within the frame just to make sure it wasn't going to stick or jam, because honestly we rushed the last door installation, took a bit more time this time. We found it best to take an overnight break after the frame, and we started on the wire the next morning. You need a good flat long area near your frame to roll your wire out, and you've got to peg it down. You also need a long tape measure to measure the lengths of wire, and remember, measure twice and cut once. One thing that they do advise that we found ever so helpful was to mark the centre line of your wire with a few cable ties, and it really helps you line it up properly when you're manhandling each length of wire over the frame. I used a few fluorescent ones, but the black ones supplied are fine. Here I'm showing you cutting off the wire, and you want to sort of peg down both sides, but I think you can see those snips make very short work of cutting through the wire. Then it is a 2-person job, and all you do is wrap each section of the frame in the requisite length of wire, and that centre line that you marked helps you line up the wire on the ridge pole so that it's even. Then all you do, cable tie the ridgepole in place, and Fiona here is pulling out the wire, keeping it tight while I cable tie the rest over the remainder of the frame. And that's really all there is to it. Now, once you put the second piece on, you can see how it's helpful to have one person on the inside, one person on the outside, both for tensioning and tying. And really, you quickly get in a routine. We found that we could wrap a section rather quickly, again, with one of us unrolling it, the other one passing it over the frame. It didn't take long at all. The ends of it are actually even easier because you just pass a horizontal length of wire across, cable tie that in place having tensioned it, and trim the excess. Now at the bottom we did get into a little bit of a routine. I would push a tent peg through underneath the bottom pole and then pass a cable tie through. Fiona would pass it back, and while I'm tightening up the cable tie, she'd be counting along the rows for the next position that we needed to tie off. Just for show, I trimmed off all the ends to make it look nice and neat. And that's it. I think anyone can build one of these.
Okay, so what am I doing stood over here? Because this clearly isn't the Garden Life Direct walk-in chicken run that we're now using as a fruit cage. This is actually our commercial fruit cage that we were trying to improve upon because of all the problems that we found with it over time. So the first thing I want to sort out is price, because you're probably thinking, yeah, that Garden Life Direct one you've shown us looks really robust and this doesn't, so it's got to be more expensive. It's not. Okay, this walk-in fruit cage is actually made by the UK's leading manufacturer and supplier of those kind of fruit cages, and they do two models. They do a steel frame model and they do this, which is badged as their economy model, and it's essentially an aluminium frame. Now both, and I'm going to say that again, both are more expensive than the Garden Life Direct walk-in chicken run that we're now using as a fruit cage. The steel version of this fruit cage is significantly more expensive, so we're talking hundreds of pounds. Not a small amount by any stretch of the imagination, hundreds of pounds. This, their economy version, it's closer in price, but it's still more expensive. And particularly if you want it to be a little bit more robust and add things like this, which we did here, which is extra bracing to make it more stable, that just takes your price up because these are optional extras. This doesn't come as standard with this structure. So now we've got rid of price. That's the elephant in the room, that's gone. What else about this did we want to improve on? Well, the first thing is this plastic sides. And what's the problem with plastic? Well, I mean, it is UV stable, but it's not going to last that long. It's not going to last as long as weld mesh for a start. But if you get anything in the area which wants your fruit and happens to have teeth in its mouth, so that'll be rodents, that'll be rabbits, that's anything that wants to get at that fruit with teeth, they'll just chew through, make a hole and get in. So there's constant repairs to this. And you're far more likely to lose fruit with plastic sides than you are with weld mesh. The other thing is what I was talking about earlier is this roof. So as you can see, this is just nylon bird netting. And it has to be said, as soon as we do get that snow, we have to take this roof off. That's our routine now. But taking this roof off is so annoying. It's not straightforward. As soon as you start to roll it back, it catches on the top of this plastic mesh at the joint of the roof, and so many swear words come out of my mouth during that entire process. It really is embarrassing. So I really do think the Garden Life Direct walk-in run is a step up in that regard. But you might also notice that we've got this wooden footplate at the bottom. Now this didn't come as a standard, so we had to spend quite a significant amount of money on this. And why do we have to do that? Well, this comes back to this wonderful plastic mesh side, because unfortunately, and this may just be me, you may be more accurate than me, but when I wanted to trim the grass and come round, every now and again, not very often, but every now and again, I would accidentally trim a hole in this plastic side. So I ended up having to put this in because I'm a bit of a klutz. Now you may be better and may not need to spend that money, but nonetheless, we did, and it is something to consider. And the final comparator, actually is the robustness of the frame itself. So I'm going to put a picture up, and on the left hand side is going to be a picture of my hand against the frame of the commercial structure, and on the right a picture of my hand against the frame of the Garden Life Direct structure, and you can see just how much bigger, thicker, stronger the Garden Life Direct frame is. So as you see, the entire structure, everything about the Garden Life Direct walk-in run is a step up. It is cheaper in price, it is more robust, it is more practical, just everything about it is better.
I wanted to finish up over here where we began on our Garden Life Direct journey. We've had this in place now for over a year. It's our best broody space, and it looks absolutely brand new. But it also illustrates a point, and that point is it's a different height, it's a different width, it's got a different wire on it. So this is the taller leg length, this got 1/2 inch weld mesh wire on it. It's only 2 meters wide, and they do these things in all sorts of sizes: 2 meter, 3 meter, 4 meter, 6 meter widths, different leg heights, different wire coverings. You can get optional extras like mesh floors to prevent anything digging into your enclosure. They are incredibly flexible, and if you use our discount code of ECL10 you'll get 10% off. At the moment, at the time of filming, they've also got a special offer of almost 20% off across the range, and the two discounts combined, so you get a total bargain. You've already seen we're using one for a fruit cage rather than as a chicken run, but we've got another friend who's thinking of using one as an outside space for their cat, so they can get in from the house into one of these and use it as a safe but contained outside space. We've had other people say, oh, I could build an aviary in one of those. Yeah, absolutely, you could. They're only limited by your imagination, so grab yourself a bargain while you can. If you've enjoyed today's video, can you spare us 5 seconds? Give us a thumbs up down below. If you've got any questions on this or any other aspect of our self-sufficient life, leave us a comment down below and we'll either answer it directly or make another video to try and answer it for you. If you'd like to see those videos and everything else we make, just tap on subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit the bell next to it. It's a totally free service, but you get to hear every time we upload a new video. For today, enjoy the sunshine, come back and see us soon. Take care.